Right, we're revisiting Baird's rats once again. I got a request recently to talk about sort of my collection of them. I'll talk about some of the localities, some of the morphs, the Mexican types, and some other stuff. So stay tuned. I'll start this off by talking about the Loma Alta locality Baird specifically. This is one of two in I have a pair of these that are just got pulled out of cooling, so they'll be breeding this year. I'm very excited about it. Got these guys back in 2019. They're 2018 hatchlings, if I'm not mistaken. And as you can see, I mean, what's not to love? Look at that orange. They look like they're made of metal, which is one of the coolest things about Bairds that I've always liked a lot. So these guys, this is a Texas locality. Typically, when you see like Loma Alta, sort of Valverde is kind of in that same area. A lot of them have this sort of very metallic, with the bright oranges sort of look to them. This was produced by Dan Parker at Sunshine Serpents, and his have been sort of line bred, so they do have a much more exaggerated phenotype than what you would probably see in the wild. I mean, there is a good bit of the silveriness in the oranges, but I think it's just a little more exaggerated with his stock because, you know, they've been line bred and bred in captivity to exaggerate that look. So if you see Loma Altas, some of the nicest in my opinion. A lot of orange on the face. There was a point in time where this one was younger where I thought it was getting nose rub because that orange started coming in on the tip of the nose. And obviously that's not the case. It's just continued to improve over time, and yeah, I mean, what's not to like? So the next that I'm going to talk about is the Mexican types. So these you don't see as often, they're not as readily available. Definitely seems like there's more of them now than there ever has been. And what separates the Mexicans from the Texas? So as you can see from this guy, his head is a completely different color from the rest of the body. I wish I could figure out a way to show you without... So he's got a gray head. He's fine. Gray head that sharply cuts to the hay yellow body. And that is a very sort of hallmark of the Mexican variety of these guys. Typically, you'll have that gray head, and then they'll have some degree of either dark or lightness with the body being that orange or yellow color. So this is a pair that I got. This is my very first pair of Bairds, was this guy and the female. Sold to me as Mexican types. Whether or not he's full-blown Mexican variety, I have no way of telling. I do have another pair that are 100% Mexicans that I will show you, but this guy's a good example of sort of what the Mexican Bairds do look like. And I got these guys in 2016, so these guys produced for me last year. I have some babies. What I'm really anxious to see with the Mexican types is, like, if you cross this to the Texas stuff, does it still get that distinct head color, or do they kind of fit more the bill of the Texas phenotype? So we'll see. Time will tell. I'm anxious to explore a little more with a lot of the Baird stuff, be it the hypos and aneries and other stuff. So Mexican Bairds, if you can find them, grab them. I love them. I think that might be my favorite locality is the Mexicans, just because they do look very distinct. I think at one point in time they were considered a separate species or subspecies, but that quickly got changed, and they're still Bairds. You know, the jury's still going to be out as far as whether they should have their own sort of classification or not, but Bairds are Bairds. They're all awesome. This is my oldest male, Hypo Albino, whatever you want to call him. He is considerably less chill than the other ones. Oh, he's musking me already. So there's a lot of confusion as far as albino or hypo in Bairds. And what it actually is a T-positive albino. So if you wanted to call it a hypo, I guess you technically, according to my buddy Travis Wyman, who's a geneticist, I asked him about it. He said, technically you could call him a hypo. The two terms do get used interchangeably a lot. It is an albino at its core, technically. It's just tyrosinase positive, so they do have some of that darker pigment in the eyes. They're not red eyes. You can't really get the detail on him either, but where you would normally have that gunmetal, you have a really nice pearl color. So I've had this guy for a couple years as well. Probably going to pair him up for the first time this year. Gorgeous snakes. It seems I'm interested too with these in particular in terms of what I'm anxious to sort of experiment and see is variation in the hypo gene, see what changes in certain lines, see how it interacts with the Loma Alta stuff, see how it interacts with the Mexican stuff. That's not any project that's happening soon, just something I'm very curious to sort of play with because no one seems to really have spent a whole lot of time sort of exploring the species, in terms of genes and stuff. So I'm planning to do that. So Hypo, Albino, Tomato, the gene operates the same. It's simple recessive from everything I know. And yeah, they have dark eyes. They're not red-eyed. And as you can see, they are gorgeous. Now the whole room smells like musk. So going back to the Mexican stuff, here is one of the baby, or I won't say baby, it's actually a juvenile. It's about a yearling now. This is a Mexican Baird. This is produced by Ron Allen. And you can see the color change happening. You see the distinction of the head color to the rest of the body. I've also noticed with real, like true Mexicans, their pattern seems to be a little bit busier. I don't really know how to describe it. As hatchlings, as neonates, they definitely seem to have a little bit more... not really aberrancies, but just a busier pattern. So like you have your sort of typical rat snake saddles and stuff. These guys just seem to have a little bit like that, plus a little bit more going on in comparison to sort of regular Texas varieties or what you would expect from Texas varieties. So the color change is happening. It's taking some time. I've been kind of slow growing these guys, but excited to have more of this Mexican blood in the collection. So here's an example of one that's undocumented. It's supposed to be just Texas animals, but it does have the sort of the head transition. And what I'm wondering too with these, and maybe there's someone that knows, there's a possibility that with the Texas varieties, that color on the head comes in last. So they start out with this sort of, Mexican look. And then over time, it just happens to be the part that changes last color-wise. So as you can see, pattern is a little more sort of basic compared to the Mexican one. These guys are great. I mean, they're eating like champs. They're problem-free. They're one of the best rat snakes, honestly. They're relatively chill. Most of mine are pretty mellow. They're not very bitey at all, and they eat like champions. So, sort of a quick example of what a younger Mexican type looks like. Here's a hatchling. This is from my clutch last year. This is from the pair that is supposedly Mexicans, undocumented, for sure. They do seem to have sort of the typical Texas look, though, so time will tell. But this is what they typically look like as babies. Fresh out of the egg, they look like kind of like a gray rat. So that's why they get passed up at tables a lot. I think it shows as people see them and think it's just another kind of rat snake, not knowing what they eventually turn into and color up as. So I got 4 of these guys. They were pretty easy to get started. I have one that was a little more difficult, but these guys have been little machines when it comes to food. They've been eating great, so they're growing nicely. Color is starting to kind of fade out a little bit. Pattern's starting to fade some. They do go through a pretty dramatic shift, as you can tell from seeing the other ones and seeing this. So they get overlooked a lot because they just look kind of boring as babies, but over time they really color up nicely, especially if you get some of the really nice metallic localities like the Loma Altas and stuff, but they're all gorgeous in some form or fashion. All right, and so this is a good example of what wild Bairds look like. This is a male that is also musking me. This is a wild-caught Bairds from, this is Madera Canyon, if I'm not mistaken, from my buddy Chris. They managed to come across this guy, and he sent it to me, so he's going to get plugged into some breeding groups too. As you can see, I mean, he really doesn't look terribly different from sort of the captive bred ones. This guy's also going to get some work put in as far as breeding goes. I'm going to tie him into some other stuff, and I'm hoping that I can get my hands on a female for him. But this is a wild-caught Bairds. This is what they look like naturally. So as you can see, like the line breeding and stuff, there is a degree of sort of natural beauty to them, or a lot of degree of natural beauty to them in comparison to what you see on the tables in the line bred stuff. But I mean, this guy's awesome. As you can see, he's pretty mellow. He did try to take a swing at me when I was pulling him out, but after you get him in your hands, they're not terribly interested in biting. They just kind of want to get away. So be prepared to get musked a lot, though. They are very, very fond of that. Oh, it smells horrible. So here's another one of my younger males. This is just an undocumented got him at a show. My buddy Jason Keller got the female. This is the male. Undocumented. Still gorgeous. You know, there's a lot of talk as far as should localities be kept pure, should you not out, like, breeding undocumented, you know, no known lineage or county info, should you breed Bairds, just because it comes from that same part of the country that, like, Alterna are really, they share a habitat and share a range, and some people are pure, some people aren't. I think it comes down to what you think you want to do. I mean, this is a gorgeous Baird's. I have no idea what the background information is on him, but it's a pretty snake. I would have no issues breeding him to one of the higher silver females. I am of the opinion that if they're nice looking snakes, they're nice looking snakes. You know, just don't sell them as something that they're not. You know, I'm not going to go and breed this guy and say they're Loma Altas when I have no idea if it's Loma Alta. Just because it's a high silver or really high metallic animal doesn't necessarily mean that that's where it's from. So a Baird's is just a Baird's. When you're breeding them undocumented like that, they're still fun. They're still awesome. So here's my other Hypo male. This guy is considerably younger than the other one, but as you can see, I think he's a little different. He's definitely, color and pattern-wise, he's different from the bigger one. I mean, that may change. He may end up getting that same pinkish bubblegum sort of look to him. This is what I was talking about when I was mentioning the different lines of Bairds in terms of the Hypos and stuff, and sort of seeing what happens and how things differ. This guy ties into that. Interested to see what he does differently than the other Hypo, if anything at all. I'm not saying there is definitely going to be a difference, but who knows, there may be, there may not be. Time will tell, and once again, I'm musked. So that's pretty much it for Baird's. I do have some het anery, some of the only het anery babies in the country from Tim Spuckler. I'd show them. They really don't look any different from any other neonate hatchling Baird, so there's really nothing to point out that's different there. But yeah, this is kind of just a quick rundown of Bairds and what I'm keeping. That's not all of them. I have a couple more that all have that, you know, they all look fairly similar in terms of the color scheme to some of the other ones I've shown. So I basically just showed you sort of the flagship animals that I have that I'm working with. And if you have any questions, drop in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, all that generic YouTube stuff. And thank you. See you later.